Let's look at the possible ways in which potassium levels in the body can be maintained on an optimal. All right. So these are basically what mechanisms of regulation of potassium. If potassium is needed so much in the body, these mechanisms are put on. If potassium is excess in the body, these mechanisms are put on. Do you understand? So these are mechanisms of regulation of what? Potassium in the body. So the body regulates potassium through several mechanisms. Okay, so let's look at the examples of some of these mechanisms. We have things like the kidneys can adjust potassium excretion on serum levels. Okay, that's under renal excretion. Sorry. Okay, the kidneys can adjust this potassium excretion on serum levels. If the potassium levels is increased, it will stimulate renal excretion. Okay, potassium levels in the body are high, then it will basically what? Stimulate the kidneys to be activated to excrete this potassium out. Then for aldosterone, we say that hormone is secreted by the adrenal glands. All right, that's aldosterone. Aldosterone is secreted by the adrenal glands. All right, when the potassium levels are high. Okay, so this aldosterone will stimulate renal excretion of potassium. All right, it will also regulate sodium and potassium balance. So that means if potassium is high, if aldosterone is produced, if it is stimulating the excretion, once the potassium levels are going down, the aldosterone will stop its action. Okay, the insulin is a hormone that is released in response to high glucose levels, right? It will stimulate cellular uptake of potassium too, right? Basically like taking the potassium from the interstitial space back into the cell, okay? And it will also lower the serum potassium levels because it's taking the potassium from the serum back into the cell, from the serum back into the cell, and this will lower the potassium levels in the serum, okay? Then cellular uptake. We see that potassium will enter the cell through various transport mechanisms. All right, things like insulin, epinephrine, and other hormones can regulate what cellular uptake. Then potassium channels. Potassium channels will basically regulate the potassium exflux from cell. They'll basically control how potassium is leaving the cell. Right? Then influenced by hormones, pH, and other factors. Alright, these are basically the things that will influence the potassium channels. So instructions from things like hormones, pH levels of the body, and other factors will actually determine how fast the potassium will leave the cell. Okay. Then gut absorption. Potassium absorption in the gut is regulated by various factors. Increased potassium intake stimulates what? Gut absorption. The hormonal regulation. Hormones like what? Thyroxine, growth hormone, and cortisol influence potassium regulation, right? So these mechanisms work together to maintain a potassium homeostasis, ensuring proper muscle and nerve function, heart rhythm, and overall health. Okay, so basically, if you look at the functions of potassium in the body, you basically know the importance of these mechanisms, okay, in regulating this potassium. So that's it about the mechanisms of regulation of what? Potassium in the body. See you guys.